My decision as an investor is to get involved now before it becomes regulated, because my long-term belief is that when it does get regulated, and I'm talking primarily about the US market, there's going to be an inflow, a very large inflow of institutional capital into all of these assets. Now, you can't know with certainty who the winners are going to be, and that's why you need a diversified portfolio. So I've got a very large selection of different projects in my portfolio, about 32 of them. So different tokens, coins, equities of software companies like WonderFi, like BitBuy, like Coinberry. And to me, that's all the infrastructure. I mean, you've got to have compliant platforms if you're ever going to let this be something that the everyday person can use. Every day I'm trying to put capital to work. I'm an investor, so I'm always trying to find the path of least resistance to make good investments. And in the 2016, 2017 timeframe when I made those comments, the regulator, particularly in the US and in Canada for that matter at that time, was extremely non-constructive, if that's the best way to say it. And I made those comments in the light of how frustrating that was, because I always felt there was tremendous potential, but couldn't participate. And then all of a sudden we started to see the regulatory environment change. And that started actually in Canada. In so many ways, Canada leads with that order that you actually got, Dean. Think about it. You were one of the first to get a dealer broker license with, crypto exchange attached to it and regulated under the OSC or OSC order, which is amazing. And that just shows you one of the first in the world to get that. And that's when I started getting interesting, because I thought, all right, if the regulator's on board, I can go back to my compliance people and my auditors and say, look, I'd like to participate in this in a traditional way with diversification, many different positions. And it's been a very good outcome. And I think, yes, there's volatility. There's no question about it. But it doesn't mean that there isn't long-term value. It's a nascent industry. It's just starting out. And my path is to choose to work with regulators, to work with governments, to cooperate with them and build a business from the ground up. And I'm certainly an advocate for that, very entrepreneurial. And so when the market changes and the information changes, I change, because I'm, at the end of the day, an investor. This is a very important sector. And I'm very, very happy to be part of it, very proud to be part of it.
Where do you see Bitcoin going with regulation and maybe with some of these ESG initiatives in mind in the long term?
Well, ESG didn't matter till about 4 months ago. And now it really matters. Let's start with the investment premise. The reason you should own some Bitcoin is that I believe at some point Bitcoin will be regulated. And when that happens, it'll get an allocation in sovereign wealth and pension plans of maybe 0.5% to 1%, maybe up to 3%. That would be a traditional mandate. But if you're running a $100 billion mandate, which is a small sovereign fund, that's a lot of money. And so I would like to have a position in Bitcoin prior to that happening, because I think that's what's going to give it much more stability and price appreciation over time. No different than gold. Now, the ESG issue for most institutions who are not permitted to buy Bitcoin, the way they got exposure to the value of Bitcoin was to buy the shares of public miners. And there's some great companies out there. Hut 8 is one, Hive, Marathon, Riot. And so they're publicly trading, and you could just buy a basket of those shares, and you would see those stock prices they mirror the price of Bitcoin. If Bitcoin doubles, the stock price doubles, et cetera. It goes down, they go down. And that was just fine, except all of those miners use carbon offsets to claim carbon neutrality. Now, in the last few months, the SEC put out a memo saying that they're going to require carbon audits from all public companies that claim neutrality, including Bitcoin miners and every other company that's public. So if you claim that you're carbon neutral because you're buying offsets, you need an auditor to sign that. Now, everybody knows that carbon offsets are BS, for lack of a better word. So that's no longer an option for institutions. And I sold my shares in all those companies, not because they're not great companies, just that I don't want to be involved in debate around carbon offset audits. And so the new model that is emerging is sovereign wealth funds investing in hydro and nuclear power data facilities where they mine their coin and they keep it on the balance sheet. I'm a shareholder in a company called BitZero that's private. Its largest shareholders are out of the United Arab Emirates. That's the new model. They call it the Norwegian model. So Bitcoin mining will actually be a good thing because it'll be done with hydroelectricity, wind, solar, and nuclear power. And all of the other sources of electricity will fall out of favor. because you can't survive a carbon audit. And that's okay. I mean, look, it's just one of those things that happens. Nobody saw it coming, but Bitcoin will be fine. The attack by the European Union on proof of work 3 weeks ago, they were trying to ban Bitcoin mining with that edict. It failed. And because there's a lot of innovation that happens in Bitcoin mining, it's a lot of development of better technologies, better computing power, less use of energy, more development of hydro turbines. All of that's coming. That's all good. And that's why the European Union struck that down. But that shows you the risk here. Even the POTUS order talked about climate change, and that was a direct swipe at Bitcoin mining done the traditional way. So all of that's going to change, and I think that's a good thing. There was 1,500 institutions participating, and they own zero crypto, nothing. Now, for them to take the time to fly in from all over the world to listen to speakers talk about this means they're very interested, and they anticipate that policy is coming. And I would also argue that there was a lot of that signal there. For example, Senator Cynthia Lummis, who put forward a 600-page bill, was the keynote on the Friday to the Bitcoin 2022 conference. And she talked about how she is pushing for policy on crypto. In addition to that, we saw the Toomey and the Haggerty bills that specifically talk about stable coins. That's another group of initiatives. So all of this policy is coming all at the same time, which signals to institutions that it's time to start understanding this asset class. But I think what will happen first is, if we're going to get policy, it's probably going to be around something very conservative, like a stable coin, like a USDC or another stable coin, which would allow institutions to use it and stake it or lend it and try and get a 4 or 5% interest rate on it, which they can't do with cash right now. And as a payment system, it's far superior to anything else out there, much faster, more transparent, certainly auditable through the chain. And so a lot of good things happening there. But again, it's all policy and it's all software innovation, and it'll come at the pace it comes. But I'm making investments across all of these places. I take a view that I'm looking for long-term economic value. So on some of the more speculative coins, which are lots of fun, I don't really hold much of those, with the exception of Potherium, because I'm involved in the cat DNA business, and Potherium gives a portion of proceeds to cat shelters. So that's my fun, crazy chicken coin. But it's one that I'm just supportive of that industry. There's 110 million cats in North America, and I provide DNA services for them. So that's the reason I own that one. But the rest of the coins are more in the traditional flavor of Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Polygon, Serum, Avalanche, HBAR. These are some of the positions I've got. Helium, if I didn't mention that one already. I mean, these things are projects that have economic long-term value to me. In addition, I own the equities, obviously, of WonderFi, Immutable Holdings, which owns NFT.com. It's also publicly traded in Canada. And I'm a private shareholder, along with shareholders in the United Arab Emirates, in BitZero, that is mining my coin for me on an ethical and green basis with no carbon audits, because it's all hydro and nuclear power. So, at the end of the day, I'm trying to take positions here that are very, very diverse.
Assuming the SEC drama goes well, what is your view on XRP, and sort of how do you see this process playing out, and maybe what precedent does it set for other cryptocurrency coins out there?
XRP has to clean up its act with the regulator, and that has to get completely resolved. It's also on the no-fly zone list in many other jurisdictions, if you want to call it that. We cannot afford to put that on any platform that we have that's regulated, for obvious reasons. And it's up for that project to get out of the penalty box it's in. And I have no problem once they clear the regulatory hurdle and everything is clean. But I want to point something out. If you look at the Toomey bill or the Haggerty bill, they call for a clean audit every 30 days. And they also call for no assets that have a duration of more than 12 months. But it's the clear audit every 30 days that everybody's going to have to comply by on these types of tokens and coins. And so you have to be able to show that whatever you're saying, your assets that are backing it up. And, that's why you have, players that are less controversial, like USDC, providing that, even though that's not regulated yet either. But that's how they were able to convince Fidelity and BlackRock to put up $400 million, I assume. That's a huge investment. So, XRP, it'd be great after it's cleaned up its act, after the regulator and the OSC says it's okay then it's okay for us. But we do not go rogue. We are not crypto cowboys. But I don't know who's going to win. I'm also a shareholder in FTX and a paid spokesperson for them. So there's that. Big user of USDC. So I have a lot of different positions, and I manage them like a portfolio. I try and have diversity, and I keep an eye on what's happening. I try and stay au courant. But certainly for me, the most interesting right now is what's going on in Canada, the most advanced regulator in the world. And Canada has an opportunity to lead the world in how we're building out this compliant crypto platform in WonderFi, Coinberry, BitBuy. I think it's just terrific.